Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and welcome back to part 3 of my series, What If Game of Thrones Went to 10 Seasons? It's been a while since the last one, but for this season I'm going to cover the first half of my Winds of Winter prediction chapters, and I'm going to be using my Winds of Winter prediction series as a basis here, but there will be some changes like in the actual show compared to the books. And yeah, if you remember from last time, Jon Snow, Mance Rayder, and Quentyn Martell all died while Theon escaped. Without further ado, let's begin. To start off season 7, we follow up Jon Snow's death with the reaction as Ghost alerts Stannis' queen, his daughter, Stannis' men, and between all of them and Val, it causes complete chaos at the Watch, but Val and some of Jon's loyal men decide to preserve his body by putting him in an ice chamber like the books suggest will happen. Either way, the situation is where Stannis' men send a raven telling the king about what happened to Jon. And moving over to Carhold, after a long journey, Ed arrives with Alice Karstark and her new husband, with the wildling Sigorn from last season, if you remember, and they get into Carhold, where Alice Karstark is able to reclaim her role as Lady of Carhold. They do receive a raven from the wall, which Ed reads and contains word of Jon Snow's death. Upon receiving this, Ed leaves Carhold with the horse and the letter. Now, moving to an actual chapter adaptation, it's Theon 1. Theon with Jeyne Poole, who is still fake Arya Stark, on, although already met Stannis, is present when Jon's messenger from last season finally arrives, containing word of the Karstark betrayal incoming. Stannis immediately imprisons the Karstarks, but doesn't execute them like Robb did. Yeah, see, Robb? That's called not being a dumbass. Later in the night, Theon overhears, and we see Yara talking to Stannis about Theon, and Stannis finally agrees to execute Theon after the Battle of Ice to appease the Northern Lords. Moving literally as far south as you can go, to Dorne, where Arianne Martell is readying her ship to Griffin's Roost, and at will, and in an adaptation of Arianne 2, the people celebrate her with a small tourney/competition. In this competition, Obara Sand wins and they sail off to Griffin's Roost, the current location of Aegon, or Fagon, if that name rings a bell. Finally, going to King's Landing for the first time this season, it's Cersei 1, where, if you remember from my Winds of Winter predictions, this will feature Cersei basically talking to the High Septon about her trial by combat, where the High Septon reveals that Lancel Lannister will fight in order to lose, because if Cersei is guilty, that means Tommen isn't king. When Cersei leaves, she is met by Qyburn and tells her the Battle of Blood has been fought. And speaking of the Battle of Blood, we see that happen as Euron Greyjoy is back, and we see a brief naval battle between the Reach/Tyrell fleet and Euron's ships in the Redwyne Straits, where Euron somehow comes out victorious despite all odds and can now move on Old Town. Going away from Westeros for the first time in this season, we see Barristan Selmy and Tyrion prepare Meereen for battle while also dealing with the aftermath of Quentyn Martell's death, as now they've definitely lost the support of Dorne. Hizdahr is in jail, but we still the slave masters want to take over Meereen, and to end episode 1, we see Daenerys basically being taken to Vaes Dothrak, and the episode ends with Daenerys seeing Vaes Dothrak again. Moving to episode 2 now, we open with the Battle of Fire between the slave masters and Daenerys' supporters, and where the episode opens with Victarion Greyjoy arriving in Meereen declaring to side with Daenerys. We see Barristan's reaction to the Greyjoys arriving, and he is very happy, and Meereen accepts House Greyjoy's support in the Battle of Fire, and Barristan promises a reward. Or Tyrion, one of the two of them. Tyrion also decides to join Daario and the Second Sons in the Battle of Fire. And now let's move as far north as north goes to Bran, who's going to be playing a lot bigger of a role than he has in parts 1 and 2, where he was basically absent. And yeah, once again, Bran is green seeing with him and the Three-Eyed Raven. They see the Tower of Joy, and the scene plays out what was this scene currently playing now. Obviously, the Three-Eyed Ravens stops Bran from seeing the truth, and another Stark that will be featured significant. Oh wait, I didn't. Sorry, but that's basically Bran is stopped from seeing the truth, as that one clip is in season 6. And yeah, moving away, another Stark that will be featured a lot more compared to parts 1 and 2 is Sansa, where as she watches various lords and ladies of the Vale arrive for the tourney at the Gate of the Moon, or the tourney of the Winged Knights, Littlefinger tells Sansa a fact about most of the notable lords that appear, and Sansa, crucially, is beginning to learn how to play the Game of Thrones. And before I advance with the rest of the North in this episode, I'm taking a trip down to King's Landing where Nymeria and Tyene arrive at King's Landing and are welcomed into the small council by Cersei and the Tyrell supporters on the council. Cersei isn't thrilled about having more rivals on the small council, but the new small council makes arrangement for Margaery Tyrell's trial by combat to take place within the fortnight before the meeting ends. Now, back up north for the most important event of episode 2, being the Battle of Ice. We get to see the Battle of Ice through the perspective of Stannis, Yara, Greyjoy, and others, and the Battle of Ice ends with the ice cracking underneath the Frey army, and Stannis wins the crucial Battle of Ice. And this leads into an adaptation of Theon 2, where the Manderleys arrive at Stannis' camp, and Theon watches as the Manderleys accept Stannis as the king and pledge full loyalty to him since he supposedly has Arya Stark. And after this, Stannis receives a letter from the Night's Watch telling Stannis and Melisandre of Jon Snow's death. Melisandre offers to work her magic on Jon since he would be free of his Night's Watch vows and be more of a bargaining chip than Arya Stark would. Well, not bargaining chip, but more show of legitimacy in the North, as Jon would be a male Stark. And Stannis agrees and tells Melisandre that she will leave in the morning. But before the end of episode 2, we see the actual Arya Stark, who is training and given her next spot to look out for and basically go undercover, being the Iron Bank. Arya leaves to go to the Iron Bank, and as a side note, Arya is a character who will be taking a bit of a step back this season, as I'm splitting Winds of Winter into 2 seasons, and Arya won't be doing a ton. Now, in episode 3, it starts off with Jaime Lannister, who hasn't been in an episode since episode 6 of part 2, which, that's a while, but he's traveling with Brienne of Tarth, where they stop in the crossroads where Jaime and Brienne discuss the plan to get Sansa Stark and kill the Hound. It's kind of like Jaime 1, and that's Jaime's comeback, and as a side note, this episode's going to be featuring a lot of characters who haven't appeared in a while. Moving all the way north, Jon Snow's bodyguards and those still loyal to him are trying to hold out, but the battle at the wall, or the new battle, kind of looks lost before Ed brings the wildlings whom Jon let south of the wall after Hardhome to capture the wall, and the mutineers, being Alliser Thorne and other mutineers who killed Jon Snow. It's also Tormund's first appearance of the season, which I think is worth mentioning, and basically the mutineers are captured, in summary there. Moving to the capital of Westeros, King's Landing. After a long journey from Riverrun, the Lannister army has returned just in time for the trial by combat of the queens, being Cersei and Margaery. Before the trial starts, Bronn makes another appearance. This is his first appearance of the season, and Cersei's trial by combat takes place first, and it's the most impactful, where Lancel is able to knock off the reanimated Gregor Clegane's helmet to reveal that Gregor Clegane is alive. This angers the Sand Snakes, who storm out of the arena, and Cersei is upset at her little secret being revealed. And to make matters worse for her, Margaery Tyrell's trial by combat goes well, as I'm going to say it's Larys Tyrell who fights the Faith's champion and is able to kill the Faith's champion, declaring Margaery innocent. What the hell? I thought I just heard someone throw a rock at my door. You guys probably didn't hear that. This episode's trend is characters who haven't appeared in a while, giving their first appearance, and the latest addition to the club is Jon Connington, who finally leaves Storm's End with a small garrison, taking a majority of his army to battle the Tyrell army who left King's Landing since Margaery is freed. And another character who returns after a long absence is Sam Tarly, who sneaks in to read the High Septon's diary, where he finds out that Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark were married in a secret ceremony, to which the audience finds out via Sam telling Gilly. Sam can't figure out why they wed, and Gilly suggests maybe Rhaegar forced marriage to try and prevent outrage, to which Sam just simply says, maybe. Now, okay, I know I didn't mean for episode 3 to be literally all characters who haven't appeared in a while, but I do need to include one of them, and the last one is Davos. And if you remember from last season, Davos got Rickon Stark and Osha the Wildling to escape Skagos and return to Westeros. And in an adaptation of Davos 2, Davos is traveling with Rickon and Osha on a ship, and they discuss basically everything that's happened in the past it passed 4 seasons since Rickon was last seen in season 3, being the deaths of Robb, Catelyn, Joffrey, Tywin, Kevin, and etc. Finally, to end episode 3, we see the Sand Snakes knock on Tommen's door, and the two that are in King's Landing. And Tommen opens the door and asks who they are. Tyne and Nymeria Sand explain themselves as basically they say that Tommen's mother sent to cheer up the young king. Tommen invites them in as we see the hallway where the Kingsguard posted outside the door are dead. And before the episode ends, we see one of the Sand Snakes slip something into Tommen's cup, ending episode 3. In episode 4, we resume with the Battle of Fire, where I'm going to wrap up the Battle of Fire this episode. It opens with Tyrion fighting with his armor from the dragon pit, and Tyrion wins his part of the battle by freeing the dragons Viserion and Rhaegal as the two take to the skies. Then it cuts to Barristan, who leads an attack on some of the Sons of the Harpy, before cutting to Victarion, where he watches as the battle seems to be won, before he watches as the dragons burn ships, and he blows Dragonbinder, which Euron Greyjoy gave him from season 6, where he claimed it would bind a dragon to him. Viserion turns around only to start burning the Ironborn ships as well as the Slave Master's ships, showing the erratic Viserys is reflected in his dragon Viserion. Viserion burns Victarion Greyjoy alive and the Ironborn ships, and Barristan, Selmy, and Grey Worm both watch this, and Barristan rushes in to try and save some of the innocent men and women. He does so, in the process saving a few, but also getting burned alive and dying. Barristan the Bold meets a better end than in the show, saving the innocent at the cost of his own life. I think that's pretty cool. After that, Viserion and Rhaegal stop burning and fly around before going back into the dragon pit, as we see to the Marine and Unsullied men fighting. The Battle of Fire is over, with the ships of their enemies destroyed, and Daenerys' forces have come out on top. We go back to King's Landing, where we see Nymeria and Tyene going to the Black Cells to meet Varys, who emerges from the shadows, where we see Varys come to an arrangement with their girls to kill King Tommen in exchange for some coin and supplies, which Varys hands over. Varys smiles as he watches the two girls depart, as that was a bit of a flashback before it cuts to the bells being rung and Tommen is dead. The Sand Snakes slipped poison in for the last night in episode 3. Cersei watches and cries as her last son is being carried away to be buried. Cersei, distraught, becomes even more mad, and she then sees her uncle Kevan Lannister and commands him to bring Myrcella back to King's Landing, as now she is the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Kevan agrees, but he mentions that Margaery is not queen anymore since Tommen is dead, and Cersei's overjoyed and orders her guards to take the young Lady Tyrell now prisoner. Meanwhile, Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth have finally arrived to meet the Brotherhood. Jaime asks where Sansa is, but gets no response. Jaime calls out for Brienne, but then he gets cut out mid-sentence when he sees Lady Stoneheart, whose Catelyn Stark revived, if you remember. Jaime is shocked and shouts the words, "You're supposed to be dead," but Jaime tries to run, but he's taken prisoner by Lady Stoneheart and the Brotherhood, as Jaime's life seems even more in threat than before. Traveling all the way up north now, Melisandre arrives at the wall and sees Jon Snow dead. Ed, the Queen, and all the others explain to the Red Woman what happened to Jon. Queen Selyse asks what could be done for Jon, and Melisandre explains there is one resurrection chance, but there's a slim hope. And Queen Selyse, recognizing how beneficial this is to Stannis, orders Jon's resurrection, partly because of how... Not partly, but I also should mention Ghost repeatedly is howling and licking Jon's body. Melisandre orders everyone out, and although Ghost refuses to leave Jon. Aegon Targaryen stews in Griffin's Roost, where he receives 2 letters with good news. The first is the death of Tommen, and Aegon orders a letter to Jon Connington to march on King's Landing. The second The second letter is that Arianne Martell has arrived, and Arianne Martell finally meets Aegon Targaryen, and this, along with the Battle of Fire, takes up a majority of the episode. Arianne and Aegon go back and forth, eventually finally reaching an arrangement. And after revealing the Sand Snakes killed Tommen, Aegon agrees to wed Arianne when the war is won, in exchange for Dorne's support in the war against the Lannisters. They shake hands on the deal, and after a brief gap in appearances, Daenerys Targaryen finally arrives and invades Dothrak. Child Jogo wants to sleep with her, but Daenerys reveals her identity as Khal Drogo's Khaleesi. We basically get that conversation where Jogo says she should be punished for not going to Dosh Khaleen sooner. Oh my god, I'm getting blasted notifications. But she'll face trial and stay with the Dosh Khaleen. And at the wall, Melisandre finally leaves Jon's cold body, leaving only Ghost. After staying awake the whole time, we see Ghost going to sleep while Jon wakes up resurrected by Melisandre, ending episode 4. Episode 5, and we're practically halfway through the season now, and it opens with a typical intro and recap with Jon Snow's awakening. And then we cut immediately to the actual opening of the episode, being the Battle of Winterfell. The Manderly army, which seems to be massive, brings Lightbringer, Stannis' sword, to Roose Bolton as proof of Stannis' death. They also present Theon Greyjoy, and then the Boltons give them the hospitalities of Winterfell, which is the sign to the Manderly army, plus Stannis' army disguised as part of the Manderly army to kill the Bolton men in Winterfell and take Winterfell. And in the shadows, Stannis has emerged and watches as Winterfell falls. Theon Greyjoy is left with Roose Bolton, where he makes the fateful decision to kill Roose Bolton. Just like that, Winterfell falls, and Stannis seats himself at the grand table where Robert and Ned sat at the first in the episode 1 of the whole show. We then cut to the wall, where we get the reaction to Jon Snow's resurrection between Tormund, Val, Melisandre, Ed, and all is react with shock and happiness. Ghost is also happy, but doesn't leave Jon's side, to which Jon pets him. Val is very happy to see Jon, but notices that Jon still needs to recover his strength, as it takes a while to recover from dealing with the blows from last season and to literally fucking dying. Melisandre walks in, and Jon Snow thanks her a lot, telling her he will do as she commands, and Melisandre says, "The Lord will let you come back for a reason. Make the difference and obey the king." She then walks out and leaves Jon stunned. The next adaptation, I say adaptations, but I'm not really going to mention them a lot, but they have been adapted for a majority of these chapters and events. There's my predictions from Sansa 2 and 3. If you remember, go check out my predictions for Sansa Stark in the Winds of Winter video out now. And anyways, it's the tourney of the Winged Knights here, and we see the two knights going at each other, and over horse. One of them is revealed to be Harry the Heir. Then Harry the Heir is unhorsed, but the horse falls on him, crushing him while the little gate structure prevents his escape. Harry the Heir suffocates to death, which shocks Sansa and angers Littlefinger. They walk off, and Sansa apologizes for the death of Harry, as it was her idea to host a tourney, and Littlefinger says he was stupid and arrogant to compete knowing what was on the line, and Sansa asks what's next now that Harry is dead, and Littlefinger says Robb and Arryn will stay Lord of the Vale, and will find another way to reveal Sansa Stark as Sansa Stark. Moving over to the Free Cities, Barristan the Bold is given a small funeral along with Victarion Greyjoy, and Tyrion meets with Jorah, Daario, Missandei, and Grey Worm to determine their next move. Together they agree they need to go and find Daenerys. Grey Worm wants to go, but Tyrion refuses, as the Unsullied are needed to maintain peace in Meereen. This leads the council to send Daario and Jorah to find Daenerys and then rescue her. Meanwhile, Davos and Rickon Stark arrive at White Harbor. Rickon Stark is welcomed as people tell him, "Greetings, my lord." Rickon doesn't know what they are talking about, but as they enter the main castle, Wyman Manderly shows them a raven. The raven tells them about Davos and Rickon that Stannis has taken Winterfell. Davos is shocked, and Wyman Manderly says they will travel a small group to Winterfell, and they will inform Stannis of Davos' return and that Rickon Stark is back. And we travel south to the Kingswood, where Mace Tyrell meets Jon Connington. He receives Aegon's letter and sends a letter back to Aegon saying he will take King's Landing, but first he must defeat Mace Tyrell. We see Connington making his plans to smash Mace Tyrell before moving on to King's Landing, and to end episode 5, we travel to Bran in the cave. This is where we get the Hodor scene. Bran escapes thanks to Hodor, and there is one change I make being Summer surviving. Bran escapes the cave with Summer and Meera Reed, although he has the Night King and the White Walkers after him. Moving on to episode number 6 now. Sorry, this is going to be a long video, guys. We're already at 20 minutes, and we got 5 episodes to go. In episode 6, the episode starts with Myrcella being crowned Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Cersei looks rageful and has 2 kings guard around Myrcella the whole time. Even less lords bend the knee to Myrcella than Joffrey or Tommen, in which gets someone to ask about Aegon Targaryen. This leads into the Battle of the Kingswood, where the battle starts off great for the Tyrells, but then when Mace Tyrell receives a letter, he orders his forces to stand down. And Mace Tyrell reads it aloud, being Tommen's death and Marjorie's imprisonment, and the Tyrells bend the knee to Jon Connington and Aegon Targaryen, betraying the Lannisters. Connington orders them to rise and declares them all to move on King's Landing, while he sends another letter to Aegon. Then we zoom in on a tree, which transitions to a different tree where Jaime is held, and his crimes read aloud. Treason, kinslaying, Kingslayer, among other crimes. Lady Stoneheart gives Jaime a choice, via another brother member reading it aloud, being Tharas of Myr. Kill some Freys at a riverrun at a wedding, or he can die. And Jaime looks at Brienne before declaring he will help the Brotherhood, which shocks Brienne. Next up is Arya 2, where she is at the Iron Bank, where she sees envoys of Stannis and Myrcella competing. But then she sees Justin Massey, if you remember from last season, is Stannis' envoy. And Arya notices the girl next to him is described as Arya Stark. Arya is surprised. She's Arya Stark, not her, and leaves before realizing the girl next to Justin is Jane Poole, and Arya needs to speak to her. We go back to Westeros briefly, where Stannis leaves Winterfell with a small garrison. Stannis intends to march to the Wall to get Jon Snow on his side. Stannis leaves Theon in Winterfell, knowing the Northern Lords won't free him. Yara Greyjoy also leaves Winterfell, also stays in Winterfell. At the Wall, Ed enters and asks Jon what is to be done with the mutineers. Jon remarks, still in bed recovering, that when he is recovered, he will take their heads themselves. Val walks in then, and Jon asks about the wildling status, and Val says he has their full support, and she will do as he commands. Val then reads a letter to Jon. Stannis has taken Winterfell, and he is coming back to the Wall to meet Jon, collect the queen and his daughter, and Jon realizes what is happening in his face, and we zoom in on his face, where it cuts directly to Daenerys' face. Daenerys meets the Dosh Khaleen, and they have that same clash as in the actual show in Season 6, where not much more to say here yet. It's basically going to be the same. We cut to Meereen then, which Tyrion speaks with Jorah Mormont and watches as Jorah and Daario leave before Daario shouts, "To the Queen!" which ends episode 6. Episode 7 starts with another queen, Cersei. After learning of the Tyrell betrayal, she visits Marjorie, who is confined to her bedchambers. She tells Marjorie of the Tyrell betrayal, and Marjorie shouts at her to get out. Cersei does so, and then receives a report from Qyburn, who examined Tommen's body, and Qyburn revealed it was poison that killed King Tommen, and Qyburn suspects it's the Sand Snakes. Cersei is furious and orders Qyburn to have them arrested. Qyburn simply says they have fled the capital. Cersei then declares war on Dorne. From all the way south to all the way north, Bran is carried by Meera Reed and Summer, and eventually Cold Hands appeared, a character from the books, which is Benjen Stark. Like in the show, Benjen Stark helps them to get to safety. Bran and Meera accept this offer, and Bran works into Summer, where we see Summer taking down White Walkers, and eventually Bran gives up, and runs away as Summer chases after Bran and Benjen before cutting to the next character of significance, being Aegon. He meets with Arianne Martell and tells her of the Tyrell betraying the Lannisters. Aegon knows the Lannisters are screwed, and he waits he waits for Connington for further reinforcements. Aegon asks Aerion to send word to Dorne, telling Doran Martell to rally Dorne's banners. Aerion agrees, and we see her writing a letter to Doran Martell. We briefly move away from Westeros towards Jorah and Daario. Together they find the item that Daenerys dropped at the end of Season 6, and Jorah realizes that Daenerys has been taken by the Dothraki. Daario and Jorah then continue their journey as the Queen needs them. Over in Braavos, Arya Stark is given free time from the Iron Bank. When leaving, she sees Jeyne Poole, the fake Arya Stark. Arya and Jeyne talk, where Arya reveals that she is the real Arya Stark, and Jeyne is happy, and Arya convinces Jeyne to drop the act as Arya. Jeyne finally agrees, and we see her walking to Justin Massey before telling him the truth that she isn't Arya Stark, and that she tells him about Littlefinger, the Boltons, everything. Justin Massey appears to be upset, but he understands that she went along with the plan out of fear. Moving to the Wall now, Stannis arrives back at the Wall, where he reunites with Shireen and his wife, but more importantly, he sees Jon. He tells Stannis about Melisandre bringing him back, and the conversation between Jon and Stannis from Jon 1, and basically happens where at the end, Stannis commands Jon to marry Val and get the wildlings on his side. Jon accepts, but says there is one more thing he wants to do before leaving. To end the episode, we see someone planning in the forest, saying he's going to catch Stannis on the way back and kill him, before moving on an undefended Winterfell. A bystander listening gets caught and shot by Ramsay Bolton, who is still alive, ending episode 7. Episode 8 starts with Davos and Rickon Stark. Davos arrives at the gates, where he reveals that Rickon Stark is in his possession. Osha verifies this. Rickon tells a story, and he is let in. We then see Rickon Stark sitting at the Lord's table in Winterfell, followed by the Stark banner flying again in Winterfell. The Starks are finally back! Davos then meets Yara and Theon Greyjoy, where Rickon's first act as Lord of Winterfell is to send Theon to the cells, and Theon is arrested. The Wall is still a major point somehow, where Stannis receives 2 letters. The first from Braavos telling Stannis that, from Justin Massey, saying that Arya Stark is a fake. Stannis is angered by this, and then when he's shown the second letter, it makes him content, being that Davos Seaworth has returned and is alive with Rickon Stark, who is the new Lord of Winterfell. Stannis says he will leave the Wall immediately and he makes preparations, and while Jon is overjoyed to hear that his half-brother is alive, he thought Rickon was dead, and Jon remarks he can't wait to see him again. And as for the other Stark brother, Bran, he arrives at Craster's Keep, which I'm saying is going to be the location, as Benjen says this is where he will leave him, and Bran asks where he is going, and Benjen says he's halfway walker and can't go past the Wall, so he's helping anyone who needs it. Bran asks for him to come with, and Benjen's once again reiterates he can't, and tells him the Three-Eyed Raven wanted him to find something. Over to the Free Cities, we get the conversation between Jorah and Daario in the real Season 6, where Daario talks to Jorah about his love for Daenerys. Daario says he's too old, and yeah, it's basically the same as in the show. Going west towards King's Landing, we see Jon Connington making battle plans for the Battle of King's Landing. Connington stresses that with the Lannister army still somewhat intact, the Golden Company will deal with them, while the Tyrell army marches through the city. We then cut to Cersei oversees the Lannister preparations for the Battle of King's Landing. Cersei realizes they're screwed, and it's revealed that the Lannister army returned to Casterly Rock. Cersei makes a difficult choice, stay and die, or flee to Casterly Rock. We don't see her decision before the end of episode 8. To start up episode 9, we get the Battle of King's Landing finally. The battle is short, as the majority of the Lannister army actually isn't there. Connington hears the bells when they get to the Red Keep. Connington walks through the Red Keep, finding Myrcella. He also finds Margaery Tyrell's body. Cersei ordered Margaery's execution off screen and had someone carry it out. And Connington shouts, "Where's Cersei Lannister?" Then cuts to Cersei on the road to Casterly Rock, having escaped the city with Qyburn and the mountain. Cersei then and intends to go back to Casterly Rock to resume her position as Lady of Casterly Rock. We then travel to the Vale, where Littlefinger informs Sansa that Rickon Stark is alive and assumed the title as Lord of Winterfell. Sansa is shocked, like Jon, even more so when Littlefinger reveals that she doesn't have to pretend to be Elaine Stone anymore, and they are going north to Winterfell. Moving to Riverrun, Brienne 1 is being adapted from my Winds of Winter predictions, where we see the wedding feast between a Frey and a Lannister. They aren't named, so you can fill in the gaps. Before the wedding becomes out of control, where the Brotherhood strikes. However, Jaime refuses to kill his own family, as he does love them, which escalates the scene further. And as Lady Stoneheart sends men to hold Jaime down and kill him, this results in the end of Lady Stoneheart being Brienne sees this and gets her version of Jaime's Kingslayer by killing Lady Stoneheart, breaking her vows to Catelyn Stark. This leaves everyone quiet, including Jaime. Eventually, Riverrun's guards are able to take the Brotherhood and Brienne prisoner, and although Jaime is stunned, he's not taken to the dungeons. We travel all the way north now, to follow Stannis Baratheon, where in an attempt to get favor with the Lord of Light, Melisandre convinces Stannis to burn Shireen. Melisandre also describes a vision she sees of a commander in an army trapped in the middle of an army, which she thinks is Stannis. We don't see her vision. This convinces Stannis to burn Shireen, and which causes his wife to kill herself, like in the show. We do know that Stannis will burn Shireen as George said so, and because I can't keep Jon out of the whole season, I need to move his resurrection earlier and thus change why Shireen is burned. However, Stannis' story is also closed. While crossing down on the King's Road, Stannis' men are caught by the larger Bolton army led by Ramsay Bolton. This annihilation would be known as the Battle of Long Lake, which Stannis is killed, his army shattered, and I needed Stannis to die here because there's no place for him in the next 3 seasons, as I need to further Jon's story. We do see a couple of people leave Stannis' army, including Melisandre fleeing to the Wall, but they don't get there yet. Either way, Stannis, the last of House Baratheon, is dead, and House Baratheon is gone, with the exception of Gendry. Finally, to end the episode, Bran spots a weirwood tree around Craster's camp and via working into summer. Mira takes him there, to which Bran works, and we see the Tower of Joy before the episode ends. Only one episode to go in this new season of my version of Game of Thrones. For the season finale, I'm going to try and cover all the main characters, well, except for Tyrion, who I couldn't give it a role to do in this episode, so yeah. It's going to be a really packed episode. The episode actually starts with Sansa, who finally leaves the Vale with Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale. Sansa has her regular, auburn hair, and it's not dyed black, signifying that the real Sansa Stark is back. Moving down to King's Landing, we see Aegon and Arianne arriving King's Landing. We watch as Jon Connington puts the crown on Aegon's head. Varys is also present as Aegon is declared king of the 7 kingdoms. Kind of like, it's basically the Cersei's crowning from season 6 of the actual show. Now, another major character is Jaime, who receives a letter from King's Landing, tells him of the news of Tommen and Myrcella's death, and that Aegon is now king. Jaime remarks to himself, saying that the last of his and Cersei's children are gone now. Jaime asks where Cersei is, to which the person reading the letter makes no mention. Jaime walks down to the Black Cells to meet with Brienne. They talk about breaking their oaths before Jaime frees her and Podrick. Jaime sends both of them north. Jaime then says, on to Casterly Rock. And this is where we cut to Cersei, who arrives at Casterly Rock, and we see her walking through the halls of the rock before taking her seat as the Lady of Casterly Rock. The next major character is Arya Stark, who we see making preparations to leave. Before leaving, Arya meets Jane Poole again, who isn't disguised as Arya, and Jane thanks Arya and tells her that she is staying in the Free Cities. Arya smiles before climbing aboard the ship and leaving Braavos. Arya is finally leaving Westeros, and next season she will be back in Westeros. From one Stark to another, we see Bran's vision that he started working in episode 9. This vision is, of course, Ned at the Tower of Joy, rushing into the tower where he sees Lyanna. They have the same conversation, and although the name isn't revealed, Bran watches as a dying Lyanna gives a baby over to Eddard for him to raise. before it cuts to Jon Snow's face. Of course, I'm keeping that iconic transition. That scene was so epic as it reveals Jon to be the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, who we already know now is they were married, which was just unbelievable. One change I will make to that transition is where it takes place. As Jon is at the wall, and we zoom out to see Jon's face, revealing that him opening his sword, and after the last words of the mutineers are given, Jon executes the mutineers before taking off his cloak, marching out with Ghost and the wildlings before saying, "My watch is ended." This time, it has, and next season, Jon will not be seen at the wall once. Jon walks out, where Melisandre gives him a note saying that Stannis is dead, and Ramsay Bolton intends to march on Winterfell. Jon simply responds, "So we shall stop him." We then cut to Vaes Dothrak, where Daenerys goes on a walk before the two men appear out of the shadows, Jorah and Daario. Jorah and Daario try to get her to escape, but Daenerys wants to do one thing. This is where she gives that great speech to the Khaleesi at her trial before burns them all, walks out of fire, and gets the Dothraki on her side. That ends Season 7 and Part 3 of my What If Game of Thrones went to 10 seasons, with the Starks back in charge, the end for the Lannisters and Stannis, Jon revealed to be a Targaryen, Daenerys and Jon Snow are reborn, and Aegon Targaryen becomes king of the Seven Kingdoms, Sansa and Arya are changed for the good, ready to be players of the Game of Thrones, while Bran becomes the Three-Eyed Raven. Cersei's now Lady of Casterly Rock, while Jaime and Tyrion rise to positions of power. The second part of The Winds of Winter and Season 8 and Part 4 of What If Game of Thrones 1 to 10 seasons will come in June 2026. But until then, bye!